Samoa's Prime Minister has so far survived attempts to remove her from office after a week of political turmoil within her party. Elsewhere in the region, a new leader has been named in Tonga, while Vanuatu is still awaiting the official results of last week's general election. Well, let's unpack this all with Dr Tess Newton Cain, an adjunct associate professor at the Griffith Asia Institute in Brisbane. Now, Tess, a lot of political upheaval at the moment and deep divisions within the ruling party in Samoa, but the Prime Minister emerged from Parliament yesterday with her leadership intact.
She did, Yvonne. It's quite unusual for us to be talking about political turmoil in the Samoa context. Often Samoa is considered to be very stable compared to some other countries. But she does remain Prime Minister. It has been a very fraught couple of weeks. There's a lot of division within her party. It's causing division and confusion in the wider society. But where we seem to be at currently is that she said yesterday in Parliament that if there was to be a motion of no confidence tabled against her by members of, erstwhile members of her own party, that she would seek to have Parliament dissolved and send the country back to polls. And possibly surprisingly, she was supported in that by her predecessor and the current leader of the opposition, Tuilepa, who said that he agreed with that decision. And they had actually had a meeting, just the two of them, prior to Parliament convening.
So what's behind all this turmoil? And do you think Samoa's first female Prime Minister, who's 4 years into her leadership, will see out her 5-year term?
So I'm not going to make any predictions. I think the last time I spoke about this, I said I didn't think things were going to get as royalsome as they have become. So I'm not going to make any more mistakes on that regard. It basically stems from the fact that she removed a minister, the Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries, after it came to light that he had been charged with a number of offences relating to perverting the course of justice and other things. He declined to resign and so was removed by the Prime Minister. However, he is also chairman of the party and one of the founders of that party. And so he then worked with his numbers to have the Prime Minister and 5 of her ministers ejected from the party. So it's, in some senses, it's an internal party matter. And the Speaker of the House made it clear that the House was not for internal party ructions to be resolved, but it is having this spillover effect with a possible motion of no confidence and possibly a snap election. My sense is, I think there's a lot riding on this for Fiame personally, and as Samoa's first female Prime Minister, there's been rumblings of discontent with her leadership for quite some time, including among the diaspora communities in both Australia and New Zealand, which were very influential in terms of supporting her party to success in the previous elections.
Meanwhile, Tonga has a new Prime Minister appointed by the King and sworn in today. What do we know about Aisake Iki?
So the new Tongan Prime Minister is a veteran politician in Tonga. He's not held the position of Prime Minister before, but he has held ministerial portfolios before. He was actually the person who prompted or drove the motion of no confidence that saw his predecessor resign very abruptly in order to avoid that motion of no confidence late last year. So he was voted by secret ballot. He was nominated or accepted as Prime Minister on Christmas Eve, and he's been sworn in today. We were expecting various cabinet ministers or the cabinet to be sworn in as well, but that's been deferred until the 30th of January. So we've still got a little way to go before we know who'll be sitting in the cabinet. But there's, as I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot of talk going on about who's got there and how they got there.
There is. How much influence has the King or does the King have on the appointment of cabinet ministers? I understand the previous Prime Minister had a disagreement with the monarch over this.
Well, that's exactly right. So the previous Prime Minister got himself into a long drawn-out standoff with the royal palace, with the King, over disagreements as to who should be appointing ministers. Now, it certainly would seem, and the commentators who are much closer to this than I am have said that the fact that the cabinet the cabinet announcements have been delayed confirms what they already thought, which was that the king was playing a very large role in determining who would sit in the cabinet. And we're expecting the maximum of 4 to be brought in from outside Parliament. So under Tongan constitutional arrangements, it's possible for 4 ministers to serve who are not actually members of Parliament. One of those is quite likely to be the Crown Prince. He's expected to be holding 2 very important ministries, that of Defence and Foreign Affairs. I guess the counterbalance to that is that Tonga goes to the polls for a general election at the back end of this year. So this is an interim arrangement for about 10 months until the people get their chance again to vote on who they want to sit in their parliament.
And Tess, vote counting is underway in Vanuatu, but it looks like several well-known politicians have held their seats. However, the country could be also returning to an all-male parliament.
It does look that way, Yvonne. So as you probably remember, there was one woman sitting in Parliament in the previous legislature, in the 13th legislature. She has almost certainly lost her seat. The base that she relied on previously looks to have split, and so she won't be returning to Parliament. There is still a possibility that we will have a woman, the former deputy mayor, representing in Port Vila, but I'm not sure. It's looking fairly unlikely. So it looks like it will be an all-male parliament. We only had 7 women stand in these most recent elections. They were snap elections. My feeling is that there were a number of women who were preparing themselves to stand in 2026. And then the snap elections maybe wrong-footed them, or they felt that it wasn't a good idea to go too soon, so they've held off. And so hopefully we'll see more women standing the next time elections come around in Vanuatu, and hopefully it won't be another snap election.
And finally, Tess, it'd be really good to get your views on the reaction in the region to Donald Trump being sworn in again. How do Pacific countries feel about the new US president in his stance on climate change in particular? Donald Trump's pulling the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Yeah, so this is not a surprise. He did it last time he was in, and he signaled it very clearly that that was what he would do on return to the White House. So it's not a surprise, but it will be a disappointment. And I think it will make things very difficult for US officials who have been spending, people at the State Department and diplomats who have been spending the 4 years that Donald Trump was not in power really trying to rebuild US presence and engagement in the region. We've seen the opening of new embassies and high-level visits and summits at the White House. All of those things are going to be hard to maintain or hard to sell, if you like, to the Pacific if there isn't a meaningful commitment to dealing with the climate crisis. As we know, this is a matter of utmost importance for Pacific leaders and Pacific communities. So it's going to be hard for Rubio, the new Secretary of State, and his colleagues to persuade Pacific thinkers and Pacific leaders that the US really is their ally in what is the biggest security threat they face.
Dr Tess Newton Cain, always good to get your thoughts. Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Yvonne.